All right. Good night, everyone, and welcome to the most anticipated second installment of Checkmate, which this one is going to be the topic of today's topic is free will. And my guest at this point is no other than Placid Saul, a person who I respect a lot when it comes to debates, who is very much knowledgeable. I could go as far to say that he might be sharper than me in certain things, but he is a formidable adversary, opponent, and someone that, when it comes to going deep into discussions, yeah, he's one person that I will pick to have these kind of conversations with. Right. So, Saul, thank you for accepting my invitation. Thank you for accepting to do this particular topic. I know that this would have been a topic for you that may be a little wary, because I think over time you have discussed this numerously, if I'm not correct.
I definitely love this discussion. And I think something that is so absolutely fundamental, I never weary of discussing it. So
Nice.
I'm very excited to be here, and I appreciate you asking me to have the conversation.
No, yeah, because for me it was something that I wanted to do whatever. I'm not going to say that I'm a scholar in this. I have my pros and cons in it. I would say that I have been preparing for you, and trust me, it's tedious. It's been tedious. Right. So I didn't realize until after I asked you to do this discussion is that I think it was Sarah Lynn had notified me. He wrote a book on it. I was like, what? He wrote a book? And she's like, yeah, it's on Amazon. It's like, you could get in Kindle on the Kindle too. I was like, I didn't know that. But I saw it. I saw what the book is. I didn't purchase it. I saw what it was like. Okay, cool. So I had an idea what I was walking into, but it is what it is. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, let's give people a definition of what free will is, so they will have an idea where we're going to go with the topic, right? Let's see game again.
Sure. So do you want me to give a definition?
Yeah,
Definition
go
or
ahead.
a general
Huh?
definition? Sure.
Yeah.
So when it comes to free will, there are a few definitions, right? Depending upon a viewpoint. The most common is what's called libertarianism, which argues that free will is something that is incompatible with a determined state, meaning that individuals have a genuine freedom to choose things on their own. So when people say free will, generally they're thinking about this libertarian free will. I make a decision to go here, to do that, to do the other. Another is compatibilism, which is saying that free will and this idea that things are determined coexist. Then there's determinism, which is like all events and all human actions completely determined because of prior causes, and so therefore there's nothing free.
True.
In regards to will. Okay?
Yes.
Then there's this hard incompatibilism, which states that neither determinism or indeterminism allows for free will. There's no such thing. That this agent is and this moral responsibility is just problematic. And so this is the general definition. When people say free will, like I said, generally speaking, they're thinking about an individual who has autonomy.
Very much true. Very, very much true. So in a nutshell, for those who may not understand his terminology, people believe or perceive free will is something that you do have, and it's the act of being able to make choices by not being influenced by circumstances, exterior how should I say, situations and so forth. You can do that. Things that are around you are not going to more or less contribute to what decision you make. You have that free choice. I personally, Saul, believe that we don't have it. And the reason why I don't believe we don't have free will is because from a religious perspective or spiritual perspective, yes, there are certain doctrines that states that we have it, right? Says that we may have that an aspect. But when I have read the plethora of doctrines that I read and when you connect the dots and you connect the timelines, it's like, okay, the book says one thing, but when you go deeper and deeper, you realize that the layers that you're going further into shows you that, okay, it doesn't said. This was just more or less something being said here just to keep the masses at a particular spot, or to more or less captivate or have them at bay. But you go deeper into doctrines, and it's like, if the individual that we call God or the divine is all being, all knowing, it's like they know exactly from your point of origin to your experience, your expiry date. So all a thing in between, if you have point A and point A and point B, the middle of that has to be measured, because you cannot calculate and tell me that something is going to stop at a particular time and date without knowing all the things that have happened since from the point it started to move towards downhead. You cannot tell me, well, God has foresight, and he can see, but he's not going to intervene. For me, that's a little too much to digest. I am, by reading by Determinism by Robert Spolowski, I'm with him. If we look at an individual, look at their brought up, see how they were brought up, their education, their family culture, and all things going way back to their ancestors, their forefathers, we see elements that would contribute to them the way they are. That, for instance, the way their parents brought them up would be more or less based on how they will grow up. There certain things would change because what the parents didn't have, they would make elements and changes to allow the child to have more better now, like how our parents would have done. So for me, there is that element of calculation. I know people might say still there's some element, which is where you talk about the capitalism comes in play, that there is somewhere that free will exist. But for me, I hardcore as in, I don't see it. Honestly, I don't. So tonight is going to be your task of trying to persuade me if it exists.
I understand the task. So I'm going to say this. Mm-hmm. Philosophy is not a zero-sum game.
Right.
It means that true philosophy, which is the love of wisdom, mm-hmm. does not divide and say this is right and this is wrong. Mm-hmm. What true philosophy does is identify the underlying foundational truths that connect. So when you're saying you do not see or believe that there is free will, mm-hmm. then really the goal is to identify the disconnection that you are experiencing. And I can then provide the link between what is this idea of free will and this idea of non-freedom of will. And in order to do that, the first thing is, what is will? Before mm-hmm. we can provide some sort of a designation that it's free or not free, it needs to be defined.
True.
So my
Very
question would be, what is will? What is the definition of will to you?
I have never actually going into that to look into. So I'm at your mercy. What is will? Maybe I have an idea, but I'm not at that point of, I've actually stated it. Maybe I'm thinking of something. So let's see, based on your definition that you give, that I was on the correct track. So what is your definition of will?
So I'm going to give a general definition, and then I'm going to give my definition.
Right.
So the general definition, when someone looks it up, they're going to see that it's a faculty or power, an ability for an individual or agent to make choices or to
right.
initiate actions or to direct intentionality towards a specific outcome. And
right.
when we think of free will, we say Tantra decided to go to the store. and he did so. So it was Tantra who directed his actions, who directed his intentionality, who intended to go to the store. And we call this will, the power to direct one's decisions, actions, choices, to make choices.
Right.
But I find that definition to be,
for me, it's a little weak.
Categorically limited.
Yes.
So it's limited to a specific category, and that category is coming from the perspective of an individual who is exerting who's taking an action. But will is not. So I do not see that will is an act. It's not an action. There's another word for that. It's called volition. Volition is the power to enact one's will. It is the faculty or act of making a conscious choice or decision.
Right.
It's associated with intentional actions, right? So a volition is the difference would be, I'm going to use an analogy like a car.
Right.
I have the power to you turn on the car, the ignition begins the process that has the engine run. So you ignite the car. And this ignition for the car and the engine going is now setting up the ability or the power for one to drive the car. But the initiation of this would be volition. It would be setting up this power. It would be, I'm sorry, reverse. The ignition, turning on the car, is very different than driving the car. Driving the car would be volition, the power to direct. We say, oh, it's, that's will, it's directing. I see it differently.
Yeah.
That will is fundamental. Will is not a thing, and it is not an aspect. It is, in my definition of will, is that will is the fundamental essence of being. And the fundamental essence of being, what does that mean? Fundamental, the ground, the core, the root of what it means to exist, of all existence. So existence itself, the foundation of existence itself, the nature of existence is will. Then we can say, okay, will enacted, like saying there's something that exists, or there is existence, okay, existence. Then we can speak about existing things, a lamp, a rock, a building, a planet. These are things that exist, but existence in and of itself is neither the planet, the rock, or the building.
True.
So will is not the directing of one's actions. I don't see, not entirely. I'm saying that categorically it is small when we're talking about will, when I'm discussing will.
Yes.
And I'm prepared to explain and express how will is the absolute fundamental essence and nature of everything. It is the principle beyond what we say, oh, the 7 Hermetic principles, all is mind, beyond mind, beyond all of those things. That. So I'm saying that will essentially would be the essence or the fundamental nature of nature itself. That Brahman would, that Brahman would not be will.
Seriously,
Brahman
you went
would
there.
not be will, but will would be the foundation of Brahman.
And you're correct. You're totally correct. And I didn't expect you to go there, but he went there. No, but you are correct. And I'm with you there to that extent. I'm with you there and everything that you explain. All right. I'm with you there in every element. But for me, is that when it comes to free will, I'm still stagnant. I'm still more or less within that rut. I'm still in where I am. Be it I'm cocooned, I'm in a ditch or wherever. For me, it's still there's too much mechanics to the aspect of believing that free will does exist. Because for me personally, making decisions for me as always it always has elements always contributing towards it. Sometimes it may look spontaneous, but I'm sure if I go backwards, right, I will see that something, if not today, if not yesterday or the day before, right, it would be that of free will.
So give me more. I don't understand. What is it that you?
For me, okay. For me, that
if you agree
if we are looking at here, all right. So let's look at the brain, right? Let's look at the brain. For me, your brain is always active. So when it comes to making decisions, that fun part of your brain that allows you to make decisions and more or less sends signals to your body to walk, to move, whatever, is always active. So if I make a decision, it is more or less a part of me is already calculated. It's almost like a calculator. We punch in the codes, we punch in the numbers, but we don't necessarily see the calculator doing the calculation. It just produces the results, correct? It's like telling it 2 + 1 is 3. We don't see the calculator literally doing the calculation. It just takes the information and spits back out the resolution or what the answer is.
Okay.
For me, that there's always something going to contribute to why I made this decision, how I was able to do this, how I was able to go about this. It's hard for me to grasp or accept that something that may look spontaneous can be literally free from elements, from being able, something did not contribute towards it. For me, it's difficult to grasp that. It's difficult for me to accept it, in short, in an easier way. It's hard for me to accept that. So, I mean, and it may sound redundant. I do apologize, but again, for me, I am more coming from a spiritual aspect. I am coming from how I see it based on the doctrines I have read. I may not be able to go deep to the way how you just went talking about will and all the different analogies. But again, for me, and I understand exactly all that you're saying, not to say I'm not accepting it, I am accepting it, but it is still hard for me to digest that free will is free. You know, there's always say that not everything is not free. You're still paying for something. You may not realize that you're paying, but it is. And for me, free will still is not free. Something is contributing to it, however. Now, I mean, there are people that says both free will and determinism could be together in some element. I mean, Jordan Peterson said that we are not determined conscious beings, that some elements must be unpredictable. You cannot calculate everything. Something must be unpredictable and something that you cannot calculate. And in that self, you could look at it. That is where some aspect of will or free will does exist. And I can go there up to that point, but I need more. I need more than that. I just used Jordan, Angela, because when I was doing my research, his video came up. Right, I'm more where Robert Pulowski is, where he is. I'm more where he is, where he talks about it, and he goes back and he used the aspect of the judge. If you have heard the study, the judge who did not eat compared to the judge who ate. The judge who ate, when people go and get parole, the person that the judge had ate gave people their parole because he was fed. The judge that did not eat, right, the same people with the same aspects for parole was denied. So it shows that there are things that things are always contributing to decisions. That's my standard.
Okay. So that it is clear that I understand where you're coming from. I'm going to not just repeat back, but provide a summation.
Right.
What you're saying is, it's difficult for me to accept that there's some random component that's responsible for this freedom. That there's, in my understanding, always something that is a contributor to the why behind a person's action.
Yes.
And because there's always a contributor or a reason as to why a person has taken an action, then no action can be absolutely free. And so therefore, if will is the ability to direct one's actions, and those actions are already influenced or directed by accumulation of things, then the individual is not free.
True.
And their will is just an accumulation of the things that are directing them.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Gotcha. So that is the common understanding that people are operating on. And I like that. Let's accept that. I'm not going to negate anything that you're going to say.
Right.
Because principle doesn't negate. It's holistic. So what you're saying and the perspective is sound and reasonable and logical. And it is true. Now let's take that truth. You are right in that thinking. Let's now explore that thinking at a deeper level.
Right.
If we're looking at accumulation of things that is responsible for the activity that a person does, the question now becomes, what is the person? When we take a look at it from a physical perspective, a human being is a accumulation of biological parts.
Yes.
And those biological parts have very specific influences from their formation, given DNA, to environment, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So then the person, just at a physical level, if the person is an accumulation of biological stuff,
right,
what is that a person? No, the question is, what makes the difference? I'm going to move up the levels. Remember, we're talking physically.
Right.
So is that a person? And when I ask the question, you say, well, what do you mean? You just said a person is this. So what do you mean, is that a person? What I mean is the physical body, a accumulation of biological components. Then I look at a car, which is accumulation of
physical components,
although not biological.
But still physical.
But physical, it's just components,
right,
which are comprised of the same fundamental elements, atoms,
right,
arranged specifically. So then the car is a person, yes?
Well, based on the terminology you're using, where physical is injected here or utilized, yeah. If you're using
so a car is a person.
No, based on how you put it, by using the word physical, yeah, we could say, okay, are you saying a car is physical thing, are identical to a person? And that is where one could double check themselves. Okay, I think I used the wrong word in describing, a human, but they're saying physical. It has some more. You had to add more elements to it. You had to add chemical, biological, whatever. Where car would just be physical components, while a human will be more than physical. So is that?
Well, we're making a designation, right?
Right.
We're talking about objects. One is a human.
Right.
So we're saying that it's comprised of biochemistry, right? And the other is not biochemical. It's composed of different material. But It is a composition of material, nonetheless, either one, right? One is biological material composed, and the other is plastics and metals composed.
Right.
So when I say now we have a composition and we have object at the physical level, is it a person because it's a biological object? Does that make a person?
Interesting. I'm okay. If we go in biological aspect, I say, okay, I'll go with yes for this one. I may be wrong.
So that's the logical thing. So let's go and say, yes, it must be biological for it to be a person. Great. Right. So biological composition. So a tree is a person.
A lot of people wouldn't accept that, but I get where you're coming from.
Not a human. Not a human being, because we're clear. A human being is like saying a dog and a bird. These are separate things, right? These are separate categories of animals, right? We can say separate categories of plants, but I'm talking about it from the most mundane up. When I say here is a composition of material, a person? Your answer was no. Why? Well, because now you're specifying a particular type of material. Right. Okay. So then we go to the particular type of material, which would be biological. Is a tree a person? Not a human. Is it a person? Is it a being?
True. Very much true.
It is a being. Why is it a being? Because of the material?
If we're looking at the material, we could go, physically in aspect, a lot of people debunked, a plant or tree cannot be a being, right? As more as based on where they're coming from. As a Hindu, I would look at a tree being almost similar to a human because of what we've been taught, right? Right? Can the aspect of a tree have similar traits as a human, reproducing, being bear fruits, being able to heal after it get cuts or injured aspect.
But hold on, let's pause there.
All right.
Anthropocentrism is human being at center of all things in universe and things measured against human being. That is a fallacy. It is a human fallacy because we are so enamored with ourselves. But the question is not the measure, does it measure up to being a human? That's not the question. The question is, what is being, and does a tree qualify as being? Does a car qualify as being?
As a being, yes. So based on how one would differentiate the aspect of being, a tree could be compared to a human, a car could be compared to a human, based on the definition that is being used for that aspect of a being or a being.
Well, hold on, but the human is not a factor because when we say being, we specify human being.
Being.
But being is not human. Human is a category of being, right? So the question is, what is being?
True.
That's my question to you, because if we don't answer the question, what is being, to fast forward the argument, it's to say, look, if the aggregate of things that make up something like a car, it's just the aggregate of things, the question is, okay, is a car a being? Well, no. Why? I'm going to just go through it. Oh, because a car doesn't make its own decisions. A car doesn't have feelings. A car isn't a human. A car is not like us. Yeah. So what we're dealing with, number one, is this intrinsic anthropocentric bias that we are the measure of reality and that things must now measure according to us in order for it to have a designation of something like being. Okay? If that's problematic. It's like saying nothing exists unless it's a human being. People will look at that and go, no, that's ridiculous. Of course a door exists. Of course the floor exists. That's ridiculous, obviously.
Yeah.
But to say now, well, the car is not a being. Why? Well, because something else is driving it. Wait, what? Well, because a person is responsible for when the car turns on, where the car goes, how the car looks, what the car does.
Right.
Oh, really? Okay. So then the car is not a being because it does that. Well, correct. Okay. Then let's go to a human. If a human is a composition of biological or biochemistry parts, and the argument from the non-free will perspective is these we don't have freedom of will because all of these things are directing us, then not only is there no free will, there is no being.
Very true. Very true. See the reason why I chose you for this topic? No, but I mean, okay, with that argument, you make a lot of sense. And it gets people just like me who would have been in the same spot as me to think up to them and, okay, let's pull back a little. Let's not go steamrolling down the road as we were before. Let's pull back because now we are seeing things from a different light. And I understand where you're there. So
I'm sorry, Robbie. Let me address something real quick. Because this is, I can do multiple. So in the comments, I see comments. One is from Angela, appealing to separate arguments, to appeals to emotion, and then conflating it. Beingness versus sentience versus personhood. These are not the same thing.
No, wait. I know, but wait, hold up.
This is what she's saying.
I know, but the wild cards, they're going to come up. Angela's going to be one of them because I'm reading her comments too. So we are going to bring in those wild cards. So she's going to come up and you're going to get your day in court. So you don't want to go to attack it now. Let's go down the road that we're going for now. And when we reach a particular point, we'll bring in the wild cards. We will bring those and you will get your day in court to as is. Or do you think, I want to deal with it now as the metal is hot? Your choice.
Okay. No. Go ahead. So this is for you, from me to you.
Right.
When we're making a direct logical progression, and we say this is a car, this is a human. A car is what? A composition of things. Okay, a human, physically speaking, I said just from the base, is a composition of things,
right? And
those physical things differ in their type. So one is bioelectrochemical, one is metal, and basically metal and plastic.
Right.
Okay. So we say, okay, the material is different, but what is it? It is a composition of physical things. Great. Does that make it a being? Well, no. Generally, the answer is no, because the car is directed, etc. Well, according to free will, the human, the biochemical composition, is also directed by DNA, environment, social factors, etc., etc.
The same thing
If that's the case, my thesis is saying, then from a logical perspective, the human is not a being. The human is just a biological car driven by different factors, as it's a different material, but it is driven nonetheless according to the very argument. The very argument is we don't make choices autonomously. Our choices are dictated to us by circumstances, conditions, physical factors, and so therefore we don't have free will. Fine. Then in accepting that, we then must conclude we do not have beingness. If we deny that to a car, then we also are not a being.
No, I'll give you that. I'll give it because I give you that, Saul, because I've browsed through in certain aspects of Robert's book, and trust me, I don't think he went there. I know where he is. He's all pro non-free will, but hearing the aspect of if we believe that we are more or less different from these elements, that a car could only go can only do what it's told by turning the ignition, by putting on the lights, whatever. It could only do what is programmed. An aspect. I mean, I could understand your argument where, you know, if we are similar to a car because we have this, because of the description, we are the same components in some form or way, we are the same thing. And I mean, for me now, listening to that aspect of what you said is like, yeah, that makes more sense. So now you have my attention. Now you have my full attention and attention to, okay, I could be wrong. Now let's see, how does he close the deal? Because now, okay, I now see, okay, I could even be in that part of capitalism where free will does exist and determination will exist somehow or the other together. So you have me at that particular point. So you are changing my concept so far.
Okay. Well, my intention,
right,
is to expose will as something much as the absolute fundamental essence of nature, the fundamental essence of being, right, and not as an aspect that is associated to I don't even know what anymore, because to obviate free will, like free will, if free will is an aspect of the direction of one's activity, mm-hmm, and the direction of one's activity is simply the result of circumstance and condition, right, mm-hmm, then all freedom in that regard, if freedom means to do something apart from anything else,
right,
then freedom doesn't exist. Let's just erase that from the board altogether. There's no more freedom, because what do you mean free? Oh, well, this person made a decision. Remember, the determinist is saying that decision is only the result of all of these other factors. Fill in the blank. And so therefore it's not free. Cool. Let's get rid of that. So then what is free? Oh, well, what? Newtonian physics is clear on that. Nothing is without a cause. Therefore, nothing is free. So freedom is gone. Now we take a look and say being. Well, what is being? Well, being is this metaphysical vibe thing that no one has an answer for. It's like, bro, like I'm feeling stuff. No, being is simple. It is existence in form, period.
True.
The chair, it be. the wall, be.
So
I'm using that incorrectly so that from an English, because in English we don't have anything for this type of nature to express.
So let me see if I understand. So correct me if I'm wrong. So can I equate being to nature? Mean, if you're being like, my nature as human is to exist, to live, to procreate, to work, to cultivate in that aspect. Could we use being as also the aspects of nature? It is my nature as
absolutely,
a human.
Yes, 1,000%. What you just said, 100 million% yes. The nature of, so when we say, oh, but a wall doesn't have being, what do you mean? It has a fundamental characteristic and essence, which is immobility. True. It is rigid. It is sedimentary. It is divisive. It creates division. It is these things, these aspects, the nature of those things. It exudes the nature of those things. A wall is that. It doesn't matter, but yes, that it is. It doesn't matter the aspect.
Right.
The aspects themselves are the nature, and the nature is expressed in a variety or innumerable ways. Whether it's a stone, a wall, a shoe, there's a fundamental characteristic, a fundamental essence in regards to it. No, it doesn't mean that a shoe has feelings. It doesn't mean that the wall gets sad. I'm not equating it to human beings, which again is some sort of a fallacy that in our hubris must be done. Oh, what you're saying, Saul, is that a wall is like a human? Not at all. What I'm saying is that, does it exist?
Yes.
Well, yes. Cool. So then it has a fundamental characteristic in terms of how it interacts with other things that exist. Well, yeah. Great. So it has a fundamental nature.
True. And I think a lot of based on the conversations I've been reading up to that point, I think we are riling the masses because they're right now they're not tornado. Because how we went from free will to nature, they don't understand the concept we're going. What I think Saul is trying to say, and Saul, you could correct me if I'm wrong, is that just like a car, its nature is to move, to take you from point A to point B. If you're moving, you're going to certain places, it takes you there. It has a roof, it has doors and all the different things and all the stuff it needs to exist and to do perform its duties. Likewise, a human has all the functionalities, all the characteristics by nature to do stuff. Are they governed or determined or they're more or less contributed? Those things can be in question. But again, human, just like a car, will have fundamental characteristics and nature to exist or be or perform. That is what he's getting at.
Yes.
He's breaking it down further. Everything.
Absolutely that. And so when I say will, when I say the definition of will is the fundamental nature of being, it is the ontological premise. That means that when we say, well, what is the basis or the premise of will?
Right.
The word is aseity, A-S-E-I-T-Y. Aseity means that it is in and of itself because of itself.
True.
That is a philosophical and theological term used for God. God has aseity. The argument of Christians, or I'm going to use the Christians, when they say God, oh, well, who made God? No one made God. Why? Because God doesn't have a maker. God is God and doesn't have a premise. God doesn't have a beginning. God doesn't have limit. Cool. So that is called aseity. Now, that is what I am utilizing when I say will. What is its premise? It has aseity. Will doesn't have some other will intending it to be something. We're talking about will. And so when we say that, anything that is proposed, and this is the challenge.
Right.
Any thought, any concept whatsoever that would attribute a directive, a design for will is simply will restated. Some other nature, like this is to be this. I'm saying that the essence and nature of will is the foundation of what we call freedom, because will doesn't have a container. It doesn't have it must be this way. It is why things exist and are the way that they are. It is the foundation of the nature of the things. Why the atom does this. Science doesn't talk about the nature of the atom. It talks about the quantifiable, observational, phenomenal aspects of the atom.
Right.
But why are those? Is that the way that it is? Why is one? It's so fundamental, our minds generally can't even conceive. What do you mean, why is one? It just is one. Exactly.
Right.
It is that it is. I am that I am, God. Right? So we're talking about will, and that will doesn't have any other thing that wills it to be. It is will. So therefore, fundamentally, freedom is intrinsic. It is the foundation of freedom itself. So when I say, oh, will? Yeah. Will is the foundation of free. And will is the foundation of what? So in the comments earlier, another person was like, oh, but there's existence. Like, how does it exist? It can't be above mind. And when I say will, I'm using this term it, because there is no, we've reached the limit of language.
True.
I'm referring to the recognition of the concept. And so I cannot use any other wording but to say, the foundational essence of reality itself is itself the reason for itself and the reason for everything else. And it is not only the reason, it is the why things are the way that they are. So when we say, oh, well, there's a fundamental essence to things, like they just do this stuff right. Will is the architect, so to speak, of the why a tree is a tree, a rock is a rock, why things move, why one is one, that. So it is the foundation of why. And there's a term I would use, and I say it is why there is a how, and it is how there is a why. And why is reality the way that is, and how would it do that? It is the why for the how, and it is the how for the why.
True. Very much. So lovely. I love where you're going there. So the masses, how should I set this? Right? The inmates are becoming wild and agitated in the conversation. So are you ready to more or less, are you ready to deal with the insanity we're about to receive? Because so I'm going to bring up two people at a time. I'm going to bring two people for now, and then I'll bring everybody else. But there are two people I want to bring up because they've been going at it since the beginning. All right, so let's bring up one. Where is the other? Where is the other? Here, the other person. Oh, no. Wrong. Why did it shift? Here we are. My bad. I need to shift. I need to change the box. My bad. Here. Switch. All right. Now I can bring the other. Person who I was planning to bring. Where is her? Oh, hell, she disappeared? Where the hell? Okay, I'm not sure. Tina, do me a favor. Oh, my bad. My apologies. She's actually on the system. My bad. My apologies. Okay, let's bring Saul into the big box. I will shift. All right, so this is what I will bring up other individuals as we go along. Right, and we'll keep it rotating up to that point. So, Tina, I saw your comments. Sarah, I've been seeing yours. Both of you have been going fiery. So, first thing first, between both of you, do we have free will or do we don't?
Absolutely, unequivocally, we have free will. To not have free will would be the lack of existence altogether.
All right. Could we go more in depth to that? Could we get a definition, an analogy to your statement?
Will, Placide explained it very well. Will is being. It is the nature of what is. It doesn't matter what we're talking about. It is whatever it is. And the ability for it to govern what it is based on the nature that it has innately. A car is going to drive. People are going to make choices. We are able to make whatever choices. We're not free from consequence. Nothing's free from consequence. So that's a different thing. So all potentials that are available for us at our nature, we have the ability to make.
Right. All right, cool. Tina?
I go by what I lived through because I can speculate about a tree and a door and a wall. And I know that science and people that have studied movement and things like that, if I could get the words to come out and could have someone here to verify the things, but I know what I lived through.
Right.
And people have theories that we were created, we have a choice to be here. We chose to be here. It wasn't until the deepest, darkest hours that I had to ask myself, do I choose to get through this, and what's the end result to this? Because if I chose to live through the things I lived through, but then my end result says that I'm going to perish eventually 70, 80 years of when I knock off and go to the next world or whatever, because I don't truly believe the science behind humanity that I can live, I would say that my will to live does exist. Was I free in that? There were many times I was not free. I was unconscious many times. So, was there something underneath that causing me to actually live? And was it a will? I mean, I would have to say yes, that there was something in there. But an object, there's no way that any of us can know that. We can stand on it and believe in it and say we know it, and fight each other in the chat and everything else. But at the same time, we can only really speak on what we lived. I've read many, many, many things, and actually putting it together with what I physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually went through to stand
Right.
on this side of it and say I have free will. When I was held captive, I didn't have will to get up and go do what I needed to do or wanted to do. When I was a prisoner within my own self because of what others did to me based on their will, I didn't have will free enough to actually make a move in the physical realm, to move to another place in the house. So, I mean, I guess the word would be relative. This is all relative, theory and opinion. So I just speak from what I lived through empirically. I guess if there's a final question, do I believe in free will? I would say that my will to live, although was not free at times,
Right.
I mean, I guess it's like a 49%. 51%. I know we have a will. 49%. I don't know if it's free
Right.
at all
Cool.
times.
Right. Cool. So, what's your comments on on what they said?
So, Tina, when you say, I don't know if it's free, my question to you is, and you were saying, I can only know my own experience, right? I know what I've experienced and what I've lived through. My question for you is, what is the you? Can you tell me what is you?
This is why I don't like coming up here, especially in this conversation with this, because what am I mean, seriously, I feel like you don't even comprehend fully that existence is not about the free will. Existence is just existence, not a thought, not a nothing, like the center of an atom or the center of whatever we're made up of. There's no thought in that. It's a beingness.
Yeah, but Tina, I'm agreeing.
What is,
I'm
and then
agreeing with
refuse
you.
my ego like how you do.
My question to you is about you. I'm talking now from the
Yeah, but
visceral,
I'm,
from the
I'm
feel.
not here on a chopping block. I'm here to bring what I'm thinking about my experience forward for that. I'm not here to be picked apart by what you think free will may or may not be.
No, and I'm not,
That's
and
not
I'm
up for
not.
discussion.
No, we're not doing
Tina,
that. We're
listen,
not doing
listen,
that.
listen. Let me reply. Hear me. I am not in opposition to you or anyone. What I see this as is an opportunity to expose more about will, the topic, by us contributing together what it is that we see.
Right.
So I'm not against you or telling you this or you're wrong. There is no wrong. My question is a human question. When you think about you and you feel and you identify and you're feeling things, I'm just wondering, what do you identify yourself to be? Is it your nose? Like when I say this, and that sounds weird, but what I mean is like if I say a car and I say, well, which part of the car is the car?
Right.
And we say, is the tire
Because
the car?
that's the issue. It's not a pieces part. That's what, if you would wrap yourself around the entire you would be still in no. That's the difference in what I'm talking about. When you go through what I went through, when you know what it's like to watch paint dry and feel that shit in the waiting room, then you know. So you asking me, you want me to elaborate, to explain to me? I want to. My heart's just trying to give it to you, But the simple fact is, when you just be still and know, all the questions and the words and all this extra stuff is unnecessary. That's the difference. That's the difference in the monks and what they do. They actively practice being still, being quiet. They don't try to spar it out with those fencing rods with their words and what they gathered in information, knowledge wise. They live from their heart. They are being. They're humans being. They are existing in a I guess the void. I mean, I guess I spent so much time in the void, I learned how to sit still, you know. But you be still and know. It's
so
fun.
yes,
It's fun to get up here and do this, but that's why I stay in the comments. But
I get it. No, I get it. And what you're saying is very aligned with Psalms 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. This, what you're saying, is absolutely, totally, like what you just said is so true, and so it's like the truth. There are no words that are going to convey the truth about being. You just know, you just be. So I totally get that. There's no way that words are going to say, this is the right way to know the truth of. All you can do is know. Just live, breathe.
thank you.
All right. We are getting places. We are getting to places. We are getting places. Lovely.
Can I read a quote from a book that I like
you
that
can.
absolutely just defines what Placide just said?
Mm-hmm.
We are the sum of potentials. So I'm going to start with this quote. All potentials exist simultaneously, so that one who is rescued from the drowning in the waves is the same one that perishes within them, and all conditional potentials in regards to circumstance involved down to the most minute details are written and played out eternally. That's from a very good book, and I recommend you all read it. Placide, are you familiar with that quote?
I am. I've heard of that book. Absolutely. It's a very interesting book. I think it's called Ripples of Will. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard about it too.
Yeah, I have a very close relationship with the author of that book. He really goes into great detail in that book. And what the essence of that quote says is that all potentials exist. When we act upon them, we are being, because that's what we do. We live. That's what we are. We can't not do it. And it becomes eternal because we are eternal. Once we do something, we've gone down that path and started a sequence of events. Does it affect other things that have consequences? Absolutely.
Right. Mm-hmm. Where
is that how you would explain it and express it in different words, Placide?
Absolutely, yes.
Could somebody help me find Jordan, because I'm not seeing him?
He's in the box. You got him.
Oh, that's what I can say. My bad. My apologies. Because I'm like, where is he?
He is arrived.
Oh, so we brought Jordan and Angela. Okay, I've got to go.
We're ready.
I'm gonna have another person take my place. I'll be back.
Let's get ready to rumble.
No. I brought Angela up because remember she was asking you questions that you wanted to face. So let's have that out, an aspect, and so forth. Because I mean, no, go ahead, Angela. Go ahead. You were asking them questions, so you can bring them back up.
Yeah. So I've got a pretty good foundational grasp, I think, of where Placide generally sits in regards to all of this. I've followed him through many rooms with many conversations on this topic. The place my attention is at is just regarding the nature of defining the actual question, because I think that if the question is, do humans, individual human beings, have free will? That is different than the question, does all of creation have a will for what it is creating? And the differentiating and delineating of those two questions then determines how the conversation goes and how we answer it. Because is the will of the all free to create? and in doing so creates our nature? Yes, obviously. But is that the same question as are humans free? And so then it comes to a matter of degree. What are the degrees of the limits for movement within the nature? And it could also be argued that perhaps the question is only, the only freedom we actually have is to fulfill the nature. Because to say the all is free to create everything, and so it's created a wall that is unmovable, yes, the all was free to do that, and it has done that. Although it is an assumption to say that the all was free, because we don't actually know, because the all could be determined by something outside of the all if the all is actually within the womb of a bigger all, right? If we are an unborn child. So the all has created a wall that's unmovable, and the nature of the wall is to not move, and so the wall is fulfilling the freedom of the all, but then the wall is not free to move outside of the will of the all. And so that's when it becomes like we create our experience within a co-created reality, right? We create our experience within circumstances that we can't change and a nature that we can't change. And so if that's the case, what is the actual question that's being asked? When we're asking, do we have free will? Like the wall can't change its nature. We can't change our nature. We can only choose to surrender to and express the will of the all, or to resist it. And that's experiential. It's not actual. So I think that there's like a separatism that comes in when we conflate, being part of the all and spirit being able to create, because that's a separate question as well. Material determinism doesn't mean that there is or isn't spiritual determinism. And I think the line of argument, sorry, I'll stop talking in a second. I think the line of argument that Placide is going along is, we have spiritual will outside of the physical determinism, so therefore that's free will. But that's not the case, because if we have an inbuilt, inborn spiritual nature and direction that is the fulfillment of the heart and the purpose of the all that's already in us, we don't determine that. So there is spirit outside determinism, but that's not the same as spiritual free will in this separate individual way. Thank you for letting me get all that out.
All right, cool. No, see. Saul, before you reply back, wait 1 minute, Saul, before you reply back. For all those who have requested, keep your request there. I will be bringing up. What I'll do, I will rotate the boxes when me and Saul have discussed, has more or less had our 2 cents with those who are on the panel. I will rotate the boxes so everybody comes up to have their say. So I'm not ignoring you guys. It's just like when these individuals we have communicated with them or interacted with them, I will rotate the boxes and bring the rest of you guys up. All right, so floor is yours.
I just want to say one more thing before you go. So it's just a matter of hierarchy, right? We exist within a hierarchy of the all. And each level that you go down on that hierarchy, there's less degrees of freedom for movement for the creation, because it's subsumed by the level of the will above it.
Man. Yeah, we could look at it that way too. That makes some sense.
So I think that is an outstanding point. Are we speaking about this transcendent all, or are we speaking about the individual who has limit? And if we're speaking about an individual who has limit, then how would such a person with limit be truly free? So the answer is, what is the person? By definition, what is never discussed in this conversation about will is, what does it mean for a person to be? And the reason that's so important is because where I was going with Enter Child, if we are just a mass of physical components, then that doesn't do. obviously there is no freedom. If we are a condition of social circumstance, there is no freedom. And if we are a psychological domino effect, that this potential was triggered because of these things, etc., which led to said psyche, there is no freedom there either. And we can then not only dismiss freedom, but the question becomes, where or what is the person?
So conflating down physical determinism to equate to there not being a spiritual or unseen element. I don't know the word for what it is logically, but it's not sound. It's logical quicksand. Those are two separate questions. To ask whether or not there's an unseen will outside of determinism is not the same question as whether or not
Are you finished? I'm not sure if she cut out.
Sorry.
I don't know. Well, I don't know if it's entirely
kicked in. Sorry, what was the last thing you heard me say? I was
it's
just
not
saying,
the same as.
I don't know which point I cut out at. It's
you were making the point about the physical thing. It's a conflation.
I'll just rewind. Yeah. So to say, especially for those of us who are spiritual, we have an experience of spiritual reality outside of physical determinism. And so it's an appeal to the emotions of the spiritual community to say, well, we know that there's spirit, it's not just physical, so therefore we have free will. And that's erroneous, because that doesn't mean that the spiritual and the unseen isn't also bound and determined just in the unseen way.
Absolutely true, and I'm not making that statement at all. My question is really simple. There's no presupposition. What is the person?
Right,
it's not,
but the question...
I'm not saying that physicality... Remember, in my statement, I said I covered all of the bases, whether it be psychological, whether it be social, whether it be emotional, whether it be all of those things together, that the person is an amalgamation of all of these things.
Right. Are you familiar with Peter Singer?
I am not.
Okay. If you want to talk about personhood, we need to, that is Peter Singer philosophy, right? And he talks about different ways to determine personhood according to sentience and level of consciousness. And yes, it is true that the way that humans anthrocentrically, whatever the word was you use, the way that humans tend to define personhood as human-centric is erroneous, and it doesn't stand up philosophically and logically to testing, because you've got a whole heap of things a dolphin is going to be conscious in ways that a baby or a person in a coma isn't, right? And so the way that you determine consciousness and sentience, the way that we do it is erroneous, but again, that's not the same thing as then stepping it out through logically to saying that we have free will.
I'm not saying, but remember, my statement is we do not have free will. That would be a possessive, and it would be indicative of an aspect, like a person who has a cold or a person who has a pimple. My statement is that we do not possess free will. We do not have free will. What I'm asking is, the question was, what is will and what is a person? So the question is simple. My question still is not answered. What do you consider a person to be?
Right, but it's not necessary. It's actually an irrelevant point. The question would be, what is sentience or what is consciousness? Personhood is not necessary to answer the question of free will. But to what you were just saying, I actually think that that's exactly the thing. The end point of all of your logical trains about principle and nature is that at the human individualistic level, we don't actually have free will. But that doesn't mean that there's not spiritual purpose and meaning and an underlying will of the all. It's just that the end point of your argument actually does agree with what Tantra's saying.
So, yes, it does. And I said that at the very onset of the conversation.
True.
I love that these are recorded because that was the first thing I said.
Yeah.
I said, let me make it known that principle doesn't divide. It unites and it shows relation. And it doesn't say this is wrong or this is right. It shows a holistic premise. So is he correct in what he said? Yes. And so then I said, let's now investigate further. I negate nothing. I accept everything and simply ask for us to investigate even further into an established agreement. And the question still remains, which again, no one has answer for or wants to answer. What is a person?
Placide, do you mind if I say something to provide clarity? And I will answer your question in it as well.
Oh, please, please.
I'm going to read a quote from the same book that I read before. There is no action whatsoever made by the player of the chess game which in any way changes the effect, the nature of the game itself. All potential actions and results are due to the existence of the game itself, which in turn dictates and gives premise to the seemingly innumerable potentials and conditions experienced by the players of the game. The answer to your question is we are. That is it. We are. We cannot be separated from the all because we are the all. In the same nature that the car, its door, its steering wheel, any aspect of that car is the car. There is no defining aspect. There is nothing in that car that is not the car. Therefore, free will is something that everybody has because you are.
I am in agreement with that holistically because I see that there is a holistic connection. If the definition of will is the fundamental nature of being, then all that is will. There is not a possessiveness. You picked up the rock and you threw it at me, but you didn't throw any atoms. What? You didn't throw any atoms at me. You just threw the rock. And how did you separate the rock from the atoms that make the rock the rock? I did throw atoms at you, and it is in the form of a rock. So will is what I am expressing as the fundamental nature of being and not an aspect of beings. So is it the case that a human being does have a specificity to the extent in which we do not dictate reality? Correct. And so because we cannot dictate reality in its, not only in its totality, but even in its majority, does that mean that will is somehow negated? No. Is there a being that we're discussing? Yes. Then the nature of that being is, in fact, will. So if I take a cup and I say, the cup was blown over by the wind and the cup fell into the sand and it's a glass cup. In our language, we say, the cup will make an indentation in the sand. That is to say, in context, that there is a relation between the cup, its aspects, how heavy it is, the material it's made of, and other things, in this case, the sand. And so the indentation in the sand is going to have very specific particulars because of the nature of the cup and its specific existence. And we say, oh, yes, well, the cup didn't blow it. The wind blew it up. Correct. There is a relationship between the cup didn't jump off of the table. It was blown over by the wind. And the wind is carried along because of this and that. To say that will is something that is separate in units is also what I would consider incomplete. I'm saying that if will is the nature of being, and wind is there, and gravity is there, and all the other stuff is there, then it is the fundamental aspect of the things that are, and why those things are, and how those things are, and how they relate.
Beautiful, okay. Let's see if, let's bring in our other four guests for them to chime in. We'll start with Jordan. Jordan, do we have free will?
Well, I haven't heard how it's been defined. I just showed up like 15 minutes ago, I think, so I was kind of late to the party.
Poorly.
Wow. You haven't heard how it's been defined. Saul, you want it?
So my definition at the beginning of the conversation of will is that will is the fundamental nature of being.
Okay, and what is the nature of being?
The nature of beingness, we don't have any more words. We would say it would be the nature of that which exists is existence. And so I was saying that at this point, when we're dealing with the most foundational foundation, there is nothing to ratify it. It has aseity.
So I'm not sure if that would be enough to go off of, because if we're saying it's being, it is the nature of being. That's what you said, correct?
It is the fundamental nature of being.
Yes, and then I would say, where is becoming in this? Is becoming a thing in relationship to this concept of being?
Of course, because you said the word relation. And so relation is now coming from one perspective and engaging with another, or from one place to another, this relation. So yes, if we look at a pool and we say the waves of the water, they have relation to other waves. It's still the same body of water. But there is a relation, a self-relation.
Okay, so is becoming a reflection of being, like an equivalent?
Becoming is an experience. So from when we say becoming, since that is, it is an action, it is an experiential description, then, and it is a description of perception because it also has temporality, time. This baby is becoming an adult. So when we're recognizing a movement of any kind, then we're talking about that which is not absolute in its it is not a fundamental. It is in fact conditional, experiential.
As I understand it, the becoming is the other part of the definition that he's giving. So when he's saying nature, he's talking about like a blueprint that is fulfilled. So like the nature is the seed, and then the becoming is.
Yes, well, that's what I'm asking, because my next question would be, if that is the case, then can becoming perform an action that doesn't exist inherently in being?
No. Becoming doesn't perform actions, but I think I know what you mean. Anything and everything is the expression of what it is. And I don't mean will, I mean it, like the seed or the baby.
Okay, so would you describe being as possible and becoming as what is actualized from possibility?
Would I describe being as possible?
Like if being was the space of possibility, or the non-space, and then becoming was the expression of that. It's like, okay, you know how they take a piece of paper and put it over a stencil, and then you draw over top of the stencil, and then the stencil is revealed on the page. So if you were to like take a pen, like lead, like a pencil, take the lead of a pencil and run it over top of a piece of paper that's laying on top of a stencil, and then you reveal the stencil. Like if it was like a face on the other side and you ran a piece of lead over top of a blank piece of paper, a face would be revealed. Is becoming essentially expressing that which was already latent and inherent within that stencil beyond the page?
Absolutely.
Can I just add something there? I think it might add clarity for others who may not understand. Becoming is similar to time. It's a reference point. It would be a futuristic reference point to what is. So now everything is being. You cannot exist without being. Becoming is what is going to happen, what happens from one point to another. It's just a reference point. Is that what you were trying to say, Placide?
Within the scope of what he's saying, Jordan, I think that he's saying that the nature is the predetermination of possibility. So when you ask about possibility, the nature is the determination of it.
Yes. So my question would be, can something happen that wasn't possible?
No.
It wasn't determined by the nature.
Right. What Angela described, what she said, I'm gonna clip these things out. How she described that is exactly correct. It would be the nature is prescriptive to what is possible.
Beautiful. So could the nature do something that wasn't possible?
The nature is the possibility.
The nature is
no, of course, but we have to consider that we're talking about the nature of an absolute. The nature of this absolute, if there's an infinite amount of possibilities,
no,
then
we're talking about the nature of the relative.
The nature of the absolute is the nature of the relative, because the relative is a reflection of the absolute. So the relative is merely an expression of that which is. So that
not
which
that
is must have a nature. It's kind of, well, it's not redundant. It's an abstraction, and I'm abstracting for a reason. So for example, in the Gita, in action. A true sage sees in action. So he knows that his nature is inactive. His nature doesn't perform an action. There are no actions to perform. So if there are no actions to perform, and he's seeking to perform in action, and he sees in action, then he sees his nature in his degree. So they're talking about what is possible, and they're talking about the possibilities being expressed, because the possibilities can't do anything other than be possible. The actualities can only do that which was possible. So it's not a redundancy, it's an abstraction. And it's a necessary
all things are not
abstraction.
Equal in nature. Things are differentiated in nature because of quantum paradoxical logic.
Well, so here's the thing. Even then, there are four, I would argue, that there are four basic components of the absolute, just like there's four basic components of the relative. The four basic components would be there is a principle, there is a protocol, there is a substance, and there is a structure. Arguably, you could not argue against not one of those four things, and arguably they are quintessentially the same. But in a relativistic state, you have principles, you have protocols, you have substances, and you have structures. And each one is a reflection of the other. So whatever's in the absolute is inherent in the relative. Whatever in the relative is inherent in the absolute, and they are in direct relationship with each other, except for one doesn't act and the other one is always acting.
Okay,
right.
so
those four is nature.
In regards to this nature and what you're saying and what you have described, this is my response to that. In the analogy of chess, there are no actions whatsoever made by the players of the game which in any way change or affect the nature of the game itself. All potential actions and results are due to the existence of the game itself, which in turn dictates and gives premise to the innumerable potentials and conditions experienced by the players of the game. In the event that two players possess an infallible knowledge of the game, whereby all potential eventualities are known, then stalemate is the final absolute state that can and will occur, since the game has no inequality in itself. The players don't even need to move the pieces on the board at that point if they're perfect, because the purpose of the game is to expose inequality of the opponent. And that would therefore be nullified by the fact that there is no inequality that exists between the two. So when we're talking about experience, it exists as a byproduct of some inequality or lacking to some extent. And it's proportional to the degree of ignorance which comprises the individual's perspective. But the game itself represents everything that's possible, all circumstances and degrees. And it has no inequality in and of itself. So when the question is, well, is there some sort of distinction between the possibilities, the becoming, the nature? The answer is yes and no. Is the earth, is it dark and light? Both. One half of the sphere is dark, the other half of the sphere is lit up. And if you ask someone, well, which is it? Is it daylight or is it nighttime? It's both, if we're talking about it from an objective perspective. So are we becoming or are we the being? Both. Are we moving or have we always not moved at all? Yes.
Yes. So, but that goes into what I'm saying. So can being do something that is not possible?
No.
Exactly. So it is the only possibility. So that means that anything happens in the reflection of being, which being is technically becoming, because we can't separate the two. They're not separate. They're technically one thing. Our brain is dichotomizing it, and it's abstracting one from the other, and then we pretend that somehow they come together and they have some type of divine relationship, when in reality they are the same thing. It's like saying that laws have a divine relationship with substance. No, you can't separate a law from substance. Just like you can't separate a structure from a substance or a protocol from a principle. They're technically the same thing. This is us trying to circumscribe it. But getting down to the point is, if the question, it boils down to this. To really answer the question, we have to ask ourselves, are we in an isolated system? Is our infinity that we're in, where will is supreme, is it an isolated system? And if it is an isolated, or is it an open system? And if it's an isolated system, and it's closed off to any external influences, like Angela was saying earlier, is it bound by causation? Does it mean causation has to be linear? I will give you 7 ways to argue causation. It can be spontaneous. It can be it can be spontaneous, it can be instantaneous, it can be linear, non-linear, it can be non-local, local. Yes, there are at least 7 ways in which causation could act. But ultimately, is it bound by causation? And if it's an isolated enclosed system and it's bound by causation, can we name a thing that can happen in this thing that hasn't already existed as a possibility? And if we can't do that, then the will is essentially bound to those parameters. So it's free to be itself, but it's also bound to be itself.
No.
And the
So
only
Jordan,
thing it can ever be is itself.
When you make the statement, it is bound, that would be like me asking you, how heavy is gravity? How heavy is it? And the answer for a person who understands what gravity is that gravity has no weight at all, nor will it ever have a weight. It has no measure. Well, but how fast is gravity?
That's not an equivalent. The equivalent would be, is gravity bound to being a law? Can gravity become something other than a law? So what I'm saying is the will, if you take away one of those components, it ceases to be will. It has a composition.
No,
if you remove substance, it's not will anymore.
Okay, but what is the definition of will that I gave?
The definition of will that you gave.
Nature and being.
Yes, the fundamental nature of being. But the fundamental nature of being has to have a practical application.
Hold on.
Let me ask you one more question to settle.
I just want you to clarify one word, and you can go on. It's the whole thing. It.
Yes, and I would
tell
you
when you said, the close this and the close that, and it can, and it. So you're talking about things of existence. And if things of anything and everything that you say, and every word that comes out of your mouth and every thought that you have henceforward, this moment, is an identification of will, given the definition I gave.
I'm not, and I wouldn't argue that, but what I would argue is practically it is compositional. It has a composition. If you say that it doesn't have vibration, then an action is, or activity is, an illusion of perception. Then at the end of the day, the absence of the illusion of perception ceases. The illusion of perception. The illusion of action ceases to exist because you've removed the component that's necessary for that perception to exist. So it has a composition. If I remove mind from will, it ceases to be will. If I remove vibration or rhythm, if I remove any of the principles, so it can't precede the principles, it must be the principles. It must be causation itself, so it's bound by causation. It must be vibration, so it's bound to vibration. It must be any type of derivative, must be it. And if you remove any facet of it compositionally, it ceases to be the thing that we're discussing.
No, so let me stay true to what I said. Yes. Let's look at what you just said. If the things themselves are abstracted, if the aspects of things like mind, if we take away mind, will somehow ceases to exist? In essence, yes, because if mind is a thing that exists and you are to now take away its existence, and will is the fundamental nature of being, i.e. that which is or exists, then correct. You would say that there's nothingness. And in that also would be quite accurate. We're now not having a discussion about anything whatsoever.
Well,
Well,
but the
boundary,
argument, real quick,
just
Angela, it sounds like the argument is based upon pure, absolute, isolated, a pure, absolute, isolated abstraction. You were saying that it precedes being, it precedes becoming, it's beyond all these things, yet somehow it's still interactive with these things. As soon as you
no,
interact, you have continuity at the
no,
boundary.
there's no interaction. There's no interaction.
Then
Interact.
then it's compositionally composed of it. You can't
It
separate it from
is.
its composition.
There is no composition. No. Look at the word compose. What does it mean? What does the word compose mean?
can I just
Think about it.
rewind before we get further through this? Just to pause and go back, Placid, can I confirm, do you object to the idea that we are bound?
Human beings? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Human beings are quite bound.
Okay, because the point where this train of thought veered off was when Jordan was saying that we were bound, and then you seem to be objecting to that.
I'm not objecting to humans being bound. What I was about to object to is will being bound by the things that it serves as foundation for. And the answer would be, if what Jordan is trying to say is, oh, well, it loses its composition. But composition is something that is comprised of many things. It is not to have a composition.
No. We're not saying that it's comprised of many things. I'm using I'm using the argument from the Gita. I'm saying that Brahman is the only thing that exists, and Brahman doesn't act. The appearance of action is true, but the appearance of action is a derivative of perception, which is Maya. That perception is derived from having principles such as vibration to allow for that perception to occur. So compositionally, the nature is fundamentally integral. There is no separation in the nature. There's only an illusion of separation in the degree, but it does, for the sake of argument, it does have a it is comprised of principle. It is comprised of protocol. It is comprised of substance and structure. And technically, they are one because Brahman is everything. Brahman is the one thing that does exist, and nothing can happen in Brahman that hasn't always existed. So for you to say that it's not bound, it is infinitely bound to being that. It's like saying, can Brahman be something other than Brahman?
Jordan, I'm going to go down the path that you've opened up. No resistance.
Can I say something real quick before you do?
Of course.
I promise I'll be quick. Jordan, you asked where vibration is in will. It isn't in will. There is no vibration in will because will doesn't move. But where can you see will in vibration? Everywhere. Will is vibration. But it isn't a measurement. It isn't something that can be seen in the same way that how fast is the car moving? 60 miles an hour. Or what speed is speed? How fast? How do you determine that what's fast? You don't. It is a reference.
So Sarah, you're not understanding my argument. So let me provide you with some insight. What I'm saying is you're right. It doesn't vibrate. It is vibration. But that means it's comprised of vibration, the principle of vibration. That is a component, for the sake of argument, in a human body with a human brain. If you remove vibration, then it ceases to be will. If you remove any of these facets from it, it ceases to be will. So it's not some type of abstract that precedes everything else. It is all of those things. And if you say that it's not, then it negates the entire argument.
No. I don't think you understand.
He's not. You're not understanding what you're saying. You're not understanding what you're saying. Jordan, first of all, the reason I asked for the definition of composition, you've used it. You're saying it's comprised of. Composition refers to an arrangement, combination, or assembly of parts to form a whole. That's what it means.
I thought it was you that said comprised of, Saul. But Sarah, the thing is, if you define will as nature, then you are defining will as principle. So then will is being defined as inherently containing the principle of vibration because it's the nature. If it's the nature, then it's the principle.
Correct. Yes, it would be the principle, which is why what Sarah is saying. What Sarah is saying, what you're saying is that the principle is comprised of the things that it platforms, and that is only the case from a limit perspective. But when we're talking about a holistic perspective, then foundational, no, the very thing that you're saying is you're discussing what is and what is not, what exists and what does not exist. That if you take away these aspects, it can no longer be. No longer be. And what is being? Oh, yeah, that's right. The definition would be will. So it no longer is. So if something
you're defining being as will. I'm saying that will is comprised. And when I say comprised, I don't mean literally. I'm saying that will is an emergent property essentially of principle, protocol, substance, and structure.
Okay, so then you're right.
The will itself has layers.
You're saying that, then Jordan, if that is what you're saying, then you're right, because you have a different definition. You just said will is it is something that is a derivative of, it is an aspect of the principles. And if that is the view, then you're right. Then your whole thing, your perspective on that is 100% true.
But you're
the
saying
fact
that,
of the matter is
so
that we are
define...
we differ in terms of the definition.
But no,
so
because when
defining it, go ahead.
When you define will as nature, you are defining will as principle, which is those four that Jordan's outlining.
No, I'm defining it, when I define it as I said at the very beginning, that it is beyond, it is foundational to those principles. I specifically said to Tantra within the first 10 minutes or so that this would be a foundation for the 7 Hermetic principles and not an
But
equal
then what is
thing.
the nature? When you say it is nature, what are you saying that it is?
He's saying
because you can go and say that other thing, but that
is.
doesn't mean that you weren't contradicting yourself.
Angela, that's what he's saying, though. He's saying that will is nature, from nature, from will.
That's what I'm saying.
That is where principles stem from. Principles.
No, because you can't say that one thing that is another thing comes from another thing. The two things either are the same thing or one comes from the other. That's what you just said.
No,
what I said.
You're not listening, because this is what's being mixed up. I want to go back. That's why this is good. It's recorded. Right. And I'm saying it again. It is not nature. I said that I'm defining will as the fundamental nature of being / existence, so that when we're discussing anything that exists, if we're saying that if we're saying that mind, that all is mind, then this existence, it has a fundamental nature. That fundamental nature.
What is that nature?
Silence at that point. That's the point.
That's the point. That's the nature.
That's the nature. Like what she said, what Tina was saying, you cannot, now it cannot be bound by words. There's nothing to say. It is ineffable. That's where which I'm not making this is what is consistent in my book. I said at this point, then we come to that which has no words. It's ineffable. There's no name.
Pico in the comments said you agreed to will being nature.
No, I've said it many times.
Certainly did.
Is the fundamental nature.
You agreed. I just want to throw that out there.
I said that
being recorded for quality assurance.
It is being recorded. I've said many times that will is
just
the
because you said
fundamental nature
another
of being.
thing didn't mean that it's logically sound. It didn't contradict itself. So that's not a
To be
rebuttal
honest,
to say, well,
I
I
would
said
be
another thing that's
surprised if
contradictory.
will didn't contradict itself. We do
But
all
it
the
is
time, so I
contradictory.
don't see how will would be any different.
But you're right. It is a contradiction in terms, because when we come, Tantra already asked that. He said, well then, what is the foundation of it? I said, it doesn't have a foundation. There's nothing now at this point in order to give it grounding. It is aseity. So there is nothing but itself. So if we say, well, what makes it what it is? It is that it is. There isn't anything else at this point. There isn't. So when we say, and it works together, it doesn't negate what you're saying. If you're saying, oh, well, nature, cool. Nature of what? Anything? Cool. Fine. The nature of the thing, whatever it may be, of mind, of rhythm, of correspondence, whatever, then the nature of that is something that is what? Is not correspondence. It is what? Correspondence does this, and correspondence does this, and correspondence is distinct in this way, but what is the nature of it then?
Are we talking about the growth of humanity here? Are we having this discussion so human beings can grow into what our nature, our basic human being nature, it was designed to be? Is that the goal in this checkmate?
My goal is simply to place a different perspective in regards to will. Just to put it out for consideration. I think anything in terms of growth is going to be inevitable.
Well, I mean, the planets are swirling for us to grow, but we're tripping over the word will, the actual definition, to have a tendency to. So then we have to bring it back to another level, before the human is, when it's seeded and it comes out and it's egg, and what vibration goes back to the other generation and where that came from. And internally, the basic nature of a human from our creator is love. And so that's the tendency that we would tend to lead to if we weren't, done what we got done. I speak for myself. Things that happen to children, that they have these perceptions, that they have their mirroring, that they begin to think that's their basic nature. So their natural will is not what basic nature would have created it to be, because other people's unnatural will was put on them, because the will of them that have to have a tendency to affect a human that's just being, and then we go into developmental stages, a child that has no ability to weigh that out, because this is where all this is coming from childhood, trying to figure this out from generations back and what people were taught to now. So what we're getting to as this group prayerfully will pop through this all together now, is it's love. That's the basic.
So I would agree. I definitely agree. And I would say that the question that would be put forward would be, what's the nature of nature? What's whatever nature, whether we say, oh, well, it's a bad nature, it's a good nature, it's a this nature, it's the nature of this. What is the nature? What is the fundamental characteristic of nature? What is that? There isn't an answer, because when you think about it, we have to go, that's where things stop. If there is one,
crazy question,
I would love
dude.
to know.
What's
what
the
would
nature
that be?
of nature? Then you take everything out, and it's that void that we're talking about, that being still. So
Right.
you got,
Yes.
So,
that void,
if
that
we
being
know that,
still.
why are we still talking?
Well, that's I think the value in the discussion.
She just told you to spiritually shut up. That was fucking amazing. I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm saying that it's important in order to even to have a opportunity to explore and explore the connections of these things in order for there to be more of a union. There isn't a breaking like, oh no, that's absolutely wrong and totally wrong. There's always the connection. I think that's where the value is.
So can I ask a genuine question just so I can kind of understand a smidgen from my own way I look at it, I guess? Are you stating that, and Will being a guy's name is beside the point, but are you stating that Will is technically the mother inside of the father thing?
No, I'm not.
That's the will of the push, the move, the drive, the thing that makes the thing move.
No, I think that's something different. I'm saying that the thing that makes the thing anything, that's what I mean when I say will.
So the thing that makes the thing anything.
The thing that makes a thing a thing.
So the question is this. So I think Angela asked the most important question is, what is the nature of the nature? Like, what are we talking about if we say that will is the nature? We can't just say, well, it is the nature and it is the nature and sprinkle magic here. We have to kind of describe it and break it down. And the best way to do that is to extrapolate from our experiential reference point through the relative. And if it's in the relative, we have to assume logically that it's in the nature, because the relative can't reflect anything other than the nature. So now that means that the nature does have attributes. Even if they're in a state of absolution, they're still attributes, because we see the attributes in the relative. Now we can say these attributes are one thing in the absolute, but still we're discussing the same thing just from a relativistic viewpoint. And we can superimpose that over the absolute. So the question is, what is the nature of the thing that we're discussing for the argument to truly be logical?
That's the easiest question to answer of all. We have to have something to discuss. So if there's something to discuss, that is the nature, that is the will. It doesn't matter what it is, name a thing.
Okay, and that's beautiful. So now if I start removing things from it, like the principle of vibration, gone. The principle of rhythm, gone. Can it exist
without vibration? Can it exist
without the principle of vibration? That's my question. Can it?
Well, I mean, it's a...
No. So existence... Saying is there a difference between 8 and 45? No, it isn't. It's like saying there isn't. It's one contiguous thing, even though we think about it as separate, like, well, 45 is more than 8. But no, we're talking about quantity of unit. There's only one number. It's 1. So when we say 48, we're talking about 48 1. Of something, 48 chickens, 48 planets, 48 something, 400 billion some things, thing 1. There's only one number.
No, I agree. And since there's only one number, let's talk about that one number. That's where I think the logic kicks in to say, okay, let's dissect that one number. What are the facets of that one number? It's like every number comes from 0. Okay, fine. 0 is the only true number that exists, but we can still count to infinity. I want to know the attributes, because that tells me what the nature is. It's like, how do you discover the nature of Brahman through a relative? It's possible. It's been done. So that means that the nature of Brahman is seen in the Maya. And when an individual sees through the Maya, because they realize that anything in the Maya is technically Brahman in itself, and there is no Maya, and the illusion is that you think there's Maya, then you realize the only thing that exists is that unit, but still there are attributes to that unit. So let's get back to the attributes of that unit, because that's how we logically can assess whether or not what we're saying is true or false.
But the attributes of that unit are quite simply, is it a thing? Does it be? If it be's, then that's the only nature of it. There is nothing more to discuss, because it is. That is it. That is the one fundamental property of will. It is. There is no other thing to say. But when you say that, when you say that, you might as well not have the discussion at all. It's like saying there's a fuzzy bunny. That's exactly what we're talking about, though.
And the only thing I can say about it is that it is fuzzy. So let's just say fuzziness is will.
Right.
It is fuzzy, and you can't tell me it's not fuzzy.
Now we have approached the pillar that we cannot discuss. That's what Placide and I are saying. Will is that pillar. There is nothing more to discuss, because there is nothing more.
So just because I'm starting to kind of understand where you're coming from it. So like for example, atoms make up things, right? Like so the unit is what you were meaning. If that is the case, if will is like all the seashells that make up sand, right? What then is the transformative aspect of will? How are you defining that?
It just comes back to the same question about the nature of the nature. Because then if transformation is part of the nature of the seashell, like of all things over time, like change being the only constant.
Mm-hmm. So what is change to will? Is technically the question, but yeah.
But the question, so the thing is like what you're asking and what Jordan is doing is bringing it down the reality, which from to Jordan, the Bhagavad Gita and every text makes clear, especially within Kabbalah, that there's the nameless, unknown. The Ein Sof is never to be spoken. That's what we're talking about. And to be talking about it is to be missing it altogether. So to say, oh, well, we're going to somehow define something, some aspect about the unknowable is illusion, according to the very scripts that you ascribe to.
Right, but that's the
conflation. I was just trying to understand where you were coming from. That was it. I wasn't trying to argue with you at all. But,
right.
Oh no, not you. I'm speaking to Jordan about that. When we're talking about, well, give it some sort of things fall apart as soon as we say, here is a specific. This specific, this color is the best color. Now I've just created division. No. Let me just tell you that the best color is blue. I'm just saying that the best color is blue, and here's why. Okay, so there's division. If we're to say that, will.
But you guys specialize in this appeal to absolute redundancy, which is to conflate the absolute with the relative as a way of getting out of discussion the relative. And each time it comes back to yes, the Tao that cannot be named is not the Tao or whatever, right? Yes, there is an absolute that is nothing, but if we're talking about the relative, then we're talking about the relative. So yes,
and as soon as we're talking, but Angela,
circle back. Moving between
there's not an escape. There's no escape from the relative. When we speak about the relative, now we pour into the innumerable, and that's fine. If we're talking about the relative, well, what about this? That is the circle of redundancy. I am begun and end with the absolute simplicity. The nature.
Right, if the answer is the absolute and silence, then there is no conversation. So in order to engage, we have to speak relatively.
And I agree with you. So Angela, I would like to say first, I'm not having a redundant argument. If anybody's following me, I'm saying
I'm not saying you were, Jordan.
No, I'm just clarifying.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm saying that if there's continuity at the boundary, so let's go with the Kabbalistic argument. In fact, we can even go, because Tantra is a Hindu, let's go with Adipata Shakti. Okay, let's go with that. Let's say that Adipata Shakti produced the Trimurti, right? Just like Ein Sof produced Keter, Hakma, and Bina. Those are derivatives of Ein Sof just as much as Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are derivatives of Adipata Shakti. The one thing that we're not taking account for, which is what Angela was saying earlier, is it's going to become redundant if we always revert back to the thing that can't be named, unless, of course, we're establishing the fact that there's a relationship and a continuity at the boundary of these two things. Because if there is no continuity at the boundary, there is no communication. If there is no communication, there's no way for us to extrapolate any real tangible data from that thing. And since there is a way to extrapolate data from that thing, and we are derivatives of that thing, then equal in nature, different in degree, meaning meaning that the nature and the degree, the absolute and the relative, one is not merging from the other. You're purely talking about the relativistic transition from potentia to capacity, and that's still in a relativistic state, even in the state of Adipata Shakti or Ein Sof, because the absolute version of it wouldn't produce a relative. The relative would have already existed, because they are the same thing technically. So the argument is totally screwed, because we're not looking at all of the facets in a proper way, at least arguably, to where we can actually have a logical conversation about it. So absolutes don't produce relatives. Relatives don't produce absolutes. One is not a derivative of the other. They are the same thing. And the only thing that we can talk about tangibly is the relative. But when talking about the relative, we're automatically talking about the absolute, because the relative can't be anything other than what the absolute is.
It is and it isn't.
Yes, of course, one is going to be in a state of absolution and one is going to be in a state of relativity, but technically the absolute and the relative are the same thing. At that point, we're talking about paradoxes, and we don't exist in that paradoxical layer of reality where we see things in a state of absolution. But yes, that's why we invented a new form of logic called quadrant paradoxical logic, because there are at least 4 times infinity ways of seeing this reality, but we're using the most practical layer at this point.
That logic is Buddhist originally, no?
Well, it may be us recontextualizing it, but the point is it's still true fundamentally. It's like a Rubik's Cube infinite trap of logic that you can't get out of. And that's what I'm saying about will. I think will is all of those things. And I think if you remove one of those things, it ceases to be will just as much as it ceases to be anything else.
True.
Can I re-ask my question? Because none of y'all answered it, and I'm upset.
Go ahead.
So if will is what makes up everything, then what is change to will?
The creation of it, the end point. The will of the all to experience itself, to be able to come incarnate as the illusion of the Maya, as the 3D, is the requirement for change. It's the requirement for change as well as the will for change in order for experience.
I would say that change is a byproduct of will. To have will, it must change. It is a condition of the underlying premise itself.
It's a succinct way of saying what I was saying.
So, if change is a condition of will, which okay, then what is will a condition of?
In Saul's argument, it's not a condition of anything, it's the absolute. It's the beginning
point. But in
point
order for it to be to any degree, it would have to be conditioned, then, right? Or am I? It
creates conditionality in order to be able to have change and time and creation. You have to have conditionality. So the imposition of conditionality onto the absolute, therefore, allows the relative that is experienced.
Agree with that.
Other people may able chime in too. Like, it's not a bad thought. It's a decent perspective.
Hamel, you could come in. Thanks, speaker. Hamel, you could chime in with a question.
Well, who and what is creating? That's my question.
So we got to go in a minute, but I love you guys. Sorry, we got to dip up out of here. So.
Well, yes. You guys. Oh, yes.
Apologies.
No. I know you guys have your thing too. I think you guys were talking about it yesterday. You guys have a live to do where the book is concerned.
Yes, we're about to do some readings from it. So I apologize. We got like super deep into it, and then.
No. But think about it. I am actually going when you're bouncing. I will clip the live here because I want to jump across there. because I heard when you guys were doing the reading, there's some insurance and stuff. So yeah, I will be ending the live just to go to head across to yours.
Okay, perfect. Well, we're about to go, but go ahead, Humble. I know Humble was about to say something, and you just brought her up, and then we can all relocate. Yeah. But thank you guys for having the discussion, the debate. Thank you, Saul, Tantra, Sarah, Tina, Angela, Tika, Humble, all the people in the chat. Tam, I think. I don't know how to pronounce it.
I think she wanted to speak too before you go. Yeah. Tantra, I think Tam.
No. I'm gonna allow them. I'm gonna allow. No, I'm gonna allow them. So
I'm not a great debater. It's not my frequency. But free will is very important to me. It's a very important discussion. And I'm very honored to be in a room full of Sheldons and Amy Fallowfellers and Pennies. I'm one of the Pennies. So if that...
I'm a Raj.
Hi, Raj. So I absolutely believe in free will. I believe that it is your birthright, regardless of if you're a tree or if you're a human being. I'm a wildlife rehapper. I see things all the time that go against what we've been taught is an animal's nature. And I have a fundamental belief that we, when we're small children, know who we are. And I also work with children. I'm a children's yoga instructor, and I talk to children about free will, about like how they want this class to go for them and what they're expecting out of this class because it's their class. And children understand big things when you explain it to them and you give them the opportunity to think for themselves. But I have a belief that belief is expressed in the heart, and where our expressions are translated into the electrical and magnetic waves that interact with the physical world. And I can't claim that as my own. That's from one of my favorite books called The Spontaneous Healing of Belief. Earlier, Saul had said, what is nature? And can we define nature? We have all been taught that nature is based on survival of the fittest, but it is not. Nature is based on cooperation. In the morning, the birds wake up and they sing, and the trees open up and are able to absorb oxygen, able to absorb, I'm trying to hurry, able to absorb water and then release oxygen for us. And then the earthworms toil the soil, and the bumblebees pollinate, the squirrels plant the seeds. Cooperation. And there is no I in team, but there is an I in tribe, and we are all unique divine expressions of source, regardless of what you call source. Because I agree, the Tao that cannot be named is not the Tao. But we know who we are as a child. We have free will. Trees actually choose to give sustenance to their little saplings that are growing. During a drought, if they're not doing well, they will actually exchange nutrients. And not to the other ones around, but their offspring. We can actually scientifically prove that plants can see us. There are so many things that science proves. There's a scientist named Bruce Lipton, and he actually left a tenured university because they were teaching incorrect things of what we had the science to prove. And when you look at a cell, when you look all the way at the molecular biology of a cell, there are antennas that are responding to something outside of the physical realm. And we are all uniquely created, regardless of what our experience is. The Dead Sea Scrolls say if you pick up a rock, that God is within that rock. And we are all made of stardust. If you look at an atom, it looks like a star. So we are all made of stardust. And I guess that's everything I had to say in a nutshell. And I just want everybody to get along.
Very beautiful.
I just want to say something real quick to what you were saying, Tam. Well, not what you were saying, but what I was taking from what you were saying. I think that ultimately, everyone's speaking to essentially a deterministic perspective, right? And I think that the conclusion that I reach about free will is that it's an important illusion for us to hold in order for us to discover our own nature. So to the degree that we hold the illusion of free will, we engage with the Maya and the illusion of the Maya and ourselves and our own experience in a way which, when Tam was saying, like, I'm not sure it was her was saying, or maybe it was Tina was saying, the absolute, if it's love, right? The way that we arrive at that is by engaging as if we have free will. And so I think that that's part of why humans are so emotionally attached to the idea, because it changes the way that we engage, and it's necessary in order for us to fulfill our natures.
So, Angela, do you believe that free will is actually not real? That it's an illusion?
Well, to summarize the argument that we were having, it depends at which level you're speaking. The nature of the illusion is the separateness that is the I. At the level of the I think it's illusionary because it's dependent upon separation.
So you're speaking from a place of that we're all connected. But having free will does not mean you're not all connected. We're all unique, a divine expression from source.
Well, that's like asking.
Free will comes in.
Right, but that's like asking, does a cell in a body have free will to exist outside of its role and its place within the body? In order for it to be cooperative in its functionality as part of the all, it has to fulfill its part, and for it to go outside of that part would be in a way a betrayal of the all that it's part of. And
well,
so
I
if
would
it had
challenge that to say that liver cells can actually grow into other cells of other things.
Sure, but that's not separate or distinct from A, their role, or B, their part in the whole. And so we come into ego when we want to, the idea that we want to assert ourselves as separate to our nature, our place, our function, and our circumstance. That is like the root of all suffering and karma, I would say.
I disagree, and I believe that it's perspective, and I agree that it's when you get to a different level of understanding, and it may not be your frequency, and it may not be your path.
It's a little bit condescending, but okay.
But even I'm not trying to. I'm not. If you let me land my plane, I am not a condescending person. I don't come from a place of condescension at all. I do not want to condemn anybody. So if you read Ram Dass's, if you follow Ram Dass says pleasure and pain, loss and gain, fame and shame are all the same. There has been this kill the ego and everything is the same. We are all connected, but there's an I in tribe. You are supposed to have your own path. It's yours. And so intrinsically, you're allowed to have your own beliefs because you have the God-given free will to express, do, and be all that you want to be in this realm.
Beautiful question, Pika.
And I apologize if you felt like I was coming from... I believe that ego is important because it allows you to also pay attention to things that are not good for you. I believe that between authenticity, or to be in authenticity, is to be right in the center and balanced between selfless and self-love and being right there as the observer.
All right. Nice. All right. So Humble, would you like to add something to that, to the conversation?
Where are we at in all of this?
No.
I started with a question, but I lost.
Okay. No, I know. So let's put it this way. As I'm winding down, bringing it down to a close, because I want to go across the Jordan stuff, I will start with you. Do we have free will? And one statement to say why.
Yes and no.
All right, go ahead.
Yes, we have individual expressions where the perception of freedom is there. Most of it's blissful ignorance, honestly. And the illusion, or the Maya, as people want to call it. It's the veils of perception, perceived through the as a man thinketh, so he is. If one thinks that they are separate, therefore there creates a veil of illusion around them. And no, as in we're all part of a whole collective. It's no different than what Angela was talking about as far as the cells. There's an algorithm to it all, and collectively we are all unified. So it's all working together for the larger whole. Is that free will? I don't know. Yes and no. I mean, it's controversial, but I think perceptively you can look at it macro and you can look at it micro. You can attempt to put yourself in an absolute state, but I mean, are you actually in an absolute state? No, it's relativistic. And everyone is going to have unique reference points because of the expression of the alchemy of their being in this capacitated state, or their physical body. The same way a rose is different than, a blade of grass. They are the same in nature, but they are different in their expressions. All connected and unified, but very different.
Why does
the sun is different.
Why does that sound like a equal in nature, different degree statement?
Well, I mean, he says it repetitively, so it's hard not to go with that. But I mean, the point is that we all have taken on different forms, each one of us.
True.
And there is an expression of that. And in our expression, we think, because we see perspectively something different in its form, that it's different and separate from us. And therefore, there's something out here that we need to be searching for that's outside of us. It's not. It's the form. The form itself is the mother. The mother is the womb that clothes the baby. And it also clothes the father. And the mother and the father are all in one. So the principle, if we want to call it that, of the mother and the principle of the father, or the feminine and the masculine, whatever we want to call it. A rose by any other name is still a fucking rose. And the rose smells like a rose. And it has the unique attributes of a rose. But the tulip smells different, doesn't it? Does it change the nature of it? No, it's all the same nature.
Lovely.
Different in nature, equal in degree.
Just want to say,
lots of paradoxical logic.
All right, just humble. I just want to deliver something here from Instagram, because we are on Instagram. We're not on Facebook. We are on TikTok and Instagram. So there's somebody on Instagram said they can listen to you for hours.
Someone can listen to me for hours? Well, high five. Maybe I should go live more often.
All right, Sarah, free will, yay or nay, and why?
Well, is there free will? Yeah, we kind of proved here that there was absolutely free will. But when we're talking about, a specific thing, such as human beings, there are conditions to that will. So, I mean, we pretty much summed it up here just in an argument. I'm not going to just repeat everything that I just said, but there has to be some level of constraint inside of when you are only part of what is.
Right. All right. Beautiful. Beautiful. Tina, free will, yeah or nay?
Oh my God, here we go. 51% yes.
All right.
49% no. And the reason I say that is because inherently I know that I was created for love. And that's what I want. So my free will continues to strive for that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a nice
problem.
Love you.
All right. Angela, yeah or nay? Free will. Skipper. I didn't see the message. I say loud. Maura, my dear, I think this is the first time we have interacted, so I do apologize that it couldn't be longer. But still, free will, yeah or nay?
Maura, you ended up coming up. Oh, you came up right at the end.
Short answer is no one knows and no one will ever know. free will is a function of language and language alone. For many of us, we use language we try to use language in a prescriptive way, but language is only descriptive. So we can do all the hermeneutics and, just till we're blue in the face. We can try to, pull some semiotics and just try to interpret the world around us. But the experience is subjective. It's always subjective. It is from the position of self that I can understand, just as the cell interacts with its immediate environment, right? Its habitat. And if you expand that, you can call it ecosystem. But there's so much orthogonality. There's so many things that we don't see, that we don't touch. We're unable to interact with black holes that are billions of light years away, yet those black holes have some level of influence in my cholesterol, right? It would. So it's not, my take is not purely deterministic. It's more towards the idea that we think that we know, but knowledge is unattainable. If there's some breakthrough tomorrow and the aliens come down and they walk out of their spaceships and say, we are God, everything we know, everything we've assumed up until this point is thrown out the window. And that has happened many times through our history. I mean, we've been around for what, 2.5 million years, and consciously leaving trails of who we are for about 250,000. So to me, I think I'm going to have an echo. Can you hear me?
Hearing you perfectly.
Right. So to me, the idea of debating whether or not free will is a key aspect of nature makes free will the conduit towards objective reality. And reality is my perception of what I consider truth. Yet again, it becomes subjective. So something that is objective cannot be rooted on my ability to perceive it. So I don't understand the idea of an absolute that's actually relative. What I'm seeing is we are overloading language, trying to address this, quintessential question or questions: who we are, where do we come from, and where are we going? And it's interesting. It's fascinating.
True.
But yeah, I don't think free will, we have an answer to it. If it were up to me, I would say that it does not.
Mm-hmm.
Free will expresses the ideas of desire, choice, and putting those desires and choices into action. I would refer to it that way. I'm not negating the existence of nature. I'm not negating the existence of potentiality, because we all come from the same thing. And if you were to ask me, what is the root of everything? I would say, yes, we are the result of free will. Because I don't like infinite regressions, I would say if there is a deity of sort, let's call it algorithm, and the algorithm decided to create the universe, that's the only aspect, the only true aspect of free will that has ever existed. The rest has been influenced by it, and it boils down to choices and desires. So where do desires come from? I'm hungry. I want to have intercourse. Where's my husband? Where's my boyfriend? I mean, that sort of thing. But it's not really an original thought, because original thoughts don't exist. They're always influenced by something else, something prior. So there's a lot of causality. That's all I'm trying to say.
Ah, nice. Beautiful. Beautiful. Love that explanation. I think I'm going to have you up here. I think I'm going to pull you up more on a live. You say you explain things so delicately, but yet so profound. Thank you for what you just shared with us. Pika, yay or nay?
Bro, you want me to follow Mora? Like that's
no, I don't think no one could follow that. Not even I. Not even Saul might be able to follow that.
That was really well said.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I found interesting about what you guys shared about will, or in relation to it, is you referred to it as the being.
Right.
And so I was thinking about what being is and how that's manifest, and so then I went and I looked around. And to me, it's almost like the will is the act. It is the act. It is the actors. It is the it's the all-encompassing aspects, but I don't know if it's the totality. So whether or not free will, or like the fact that will exists, whether or not it's free, I'm kind of still on the fence. Part of me, when I heard this, I was like, oh man, if there isn't free will, that takes all the pressure off. But just because that's my perception of it doesn't mean it couldn't damage another's. So I do think that it's perceptionally based on whether or not it's free.
All right, cool, beautiful. Just a question. This might sound stupid, but it's for you, Pika. So am I to believe, or more or less, nameless one would be Trent, correct?
Yeah.
Just making sure, because I was like, I saw it pop, and I was like, I couldn't tell thing. Because I know that he was using Jordan profile about a day or two.
Yeah, it's the backup Universal Theory account.
Okay. Cool. So that's Trent. All right, cool. All right, lovely. Well, Tam, again, to you. Yay or nay?
Yes, I believe in free will.
Nice.
Because I have seen miracles where people with their intention have created miracles. I was injured in the army. I broke my back, my pelvis, my SI joint, both my hips, my right leg, and my left foot. And I live every day without pain medicine, predominantly. Sometimes I take an ibuprofen, but I'm able to, with free will, heal my body. I believe in the power of belief and free will. I've seen a family of Blue Jays stay behind all winter because one of their guys couldn't make the journey. I've seen this. And I believe in free will. I believe that it is your birthright. Einstein said the most important decision you make in your life is, do you live in a hostile universe or do you live in a friendly one? And whatever one choose, you're right. And so if you don't believe in free will, you're right. And if you do, it's there for you. It's your birthright.
Yeah, and I think that free will doesn't necessarily, not believing in free will doesn't necessarily negate love and healing as an absolute truth, because if that is the will of the all, then the compliance to that isn't necessarily free will, but it can still be the provision of that.
Well, you still can, if you want to take a jog, if you want to take a yoga class, if you want to talk back at work, I mean, you still have free will, but really walking in your truth and manifesting your life is your birthright. But if you don't believe in it, it's not available to you.
True. Robin?
I'm sorry, that's a broad assertion, right?
Yeah.
I don't mean to negate anyone, but to me, it's a broad assertion, right? So
exactly. Those two things are not mutually exclusive, right? You can have determinism and also have love and wholeness and healing and miracles. That doesn't negate whether or not determinism's real, but we don't need to go back and look at it.
Hi, Tantra.
Hi. Free will, yay or nay?
So I'm going to say no.
Okay.
And, I also, just before I even say this, I just want to say nobody's right or wrong on this whole thing, because it's all an individual perception or perspective, and like the understanding and understanding and the comprehension is completely individual. So like, I just want to put that out there before I say what I'm going to say. We have free choice. We have free choice. That's what we have. We don't have free will, because like for me, it's like when we're presented with something, when we're presented with a situation, there's choices that are laid out in front of us, right? So it's not just us like going like, oh, let me just make this up out of my mind and I'm going to go this way that's totally unimaginable, that nobody else would think of, like free is unlimited, unrestrained, and there's not, we don't have like unlimited like aspects of things, because no matter what, we have laws of the universe we have to follow. That literally, like, we have to follow them because they can't be negated. They can't be like, okay, sorry, you don't exist now. So law of oneness, that's out the window. We're going to go ahead and skip that for now. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, does that make sense?
True. Yeah, make a lot of sense. So, Saul, before I let you, because you were the main guest I had tonight, before I allow you to close the live, two things. One, the third edition of the round of Checkmate. All right. Did I say roundtable? That's not about if I did. For Checkmate, you were the guest for that. So I'm gonna allow you to end the live. So the third edition or the third installation of Checkmate is already signed and sealed. And that's going to be in the next, let's say, 2 weeks or so. I will give date, or week and a half. And that's going to be with Robin, Soul's Journey. That topic is going to be the measure of sin. We're going to explore every aspect of sin, and is it relative? We're going to look at every aspect of it. Is it a burden? Is it a blessing? Is it a curse? What aspect of it? How do we measure it? How do we define it in an aspect? So that's going to be the next installation of Checkmate. Monday, on the 17th, I'm going live, and this is an open discussion. I'm doing this open discussion live, where I'm going to do LGBTQ and Hinduism. There's a lot of stuff going on right now in the community and so forth, and a lot of people have reached out to me about they being persecuted from the Hinduism aspect. I'm going to debunk those myths and whatever the people have been going through. I'm going to go do that, and I'm going to go into more depth where I creating a space where people can get knowledge and so forth via Discord. I'm going to have 2 extra hosts with me, or guests, which will be Bren and an individual that I met through Sarah, which is Jolene. So 3 of us are going to discuss LGBTQ issues and situations and resolutions. But then we're going to look at the persecution via Hinduism. We will touch on other faiths accordingly. So it's going to be that on this Monday coming. So, with that being said, all right, Saul, you are my guest for this particular live. There was nobody that I could have done this particular live with. It had to be you, because I have listened to you debate this time and time again. So, I present the question to you: free will, yay or nay? And you can close the live.
Both. My answer is both. Mm-hmm. I want to thank you, Tantra, for putting together the live, inviting me to participate. And I want to address the people that are on the panel.
Right.
So I'm going to start with Tam. I very much appreciate the perspective that you have shared. I think that there's a lot of very positive insight that leads to freedom in a variety of different ways, most practically speaking. Soul's Journey, I absolutely acknowledge what it is that you have stated as well, which is there's a limit to what we as people can do and the options that we have. So that is something that is absolutely true. Freedom without limit from a human perspective, if that were the case, this life experience would be much more joyous, I believe. Mara, I always admire and respect your depth of knowledge, insight, and the ability to articulate difficult things in plain ways. And I think that you really were very apposite in pointing out that there's a limit to what it is that we're able to conceive and know. So given that, we need to have a certain type of deference when we approach these topics and argue with such fervor. Balance. Angela, I definitely think that your uncanny ability to see all of the angles and to really distill down to what's most pertinent is key. And I appreciate the fact that you brought that to the table. We need more of that, even if it's against me. Tina, what you said in regards to us being, breathing, knowing, and the fact that there is no replacement for that. I call that wisdom and truth. Sarah Lynn, you're my fave because we're on the same side when it comes to a lot of the perspective. And your intellect and your sharpness in how you go about bringing light and clarity to things that may be lost is invaluable and much appreciated. So with that, I say thank you, Tantra. Good night.
All right. Just one thing out there. When I did choose you for this particular live to do roundtable, when it came to the wild card, Sarah was number one on the list. Yeah, Jordan was there too, but still, Sarah was number one because the way she handled herself on the first checkmate, it was like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. Needs to put Sarah in there because she had it. And I approached her and she was more than willing to come in. So, Sarah Lynn, thank you for being my wildcard to bring in. I want to thank everyone who came in on Tam Tam, Soul's Journey, Humble Us here, Mora, thank you. And I hope that we have more interactions as I go forward. Tina, Saul, you, Jordan, Alien T, even though he came, he didn't say much. And I do apologize, he couldn't say much, but I know he went to do his live and so forth. Everyone who came in today, thank you. Those who in the comment section, those who were making your comments, making your voice be heard, I want to thank you all for making this a success. Please join me for the third edition, which will be with Sales Journey, and we're going to talk about the measure of sin. That should be interesting. I'm not too sure exactly who I'm going to bring in for the wildcard. I might bring in Saul again, seeing that's the aspect of what Saul follows. I might bring him in, so that might be a thing. I'm not too sure yet, but we'll see how it goes. Please join me for Monday's live for that aspect of spiritual discussion, open discussion with LGBTQ and Hinduism. Next week, Thursday, I am supposed to be live with the round table. That is supposed to be with Rachel Divine. I would confirm that by this weekend with the first video promoting it. So let's see how that goes. So thank you all right, for coming, and I will see you next time. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Having us.